And most of all, we have to think before we act. These are all big decisions. Reopening is both a public health question and an economic question, and I'm unwilling to divorce the two. There is no economic answer that does not attend to public health. In my opinion, you can't ask the people of this state or this country to choose between lives lost and dollars gained. No one is going to make that quid pro quo. I understand the need to bring back the economy as quickly as possible. I understand people need to work. I also know we need to save lives, and we have. And one cannot be at the expense of the other. As we look forward, I'm still troubled by what we just went through. If no one sounded the alarm in January and February, how do we know that it's safe to proceed now? There are stories and there is information that says some of these places that reopened too quickly are now seeing a growth in the number of cases. They're seeing a growth in the infection rate again, or they're seeing a second wave. So there's troubling signs on the horizon. And I want to make sure that we know this time that we've learned from the other experiences. And we're going to be putting together in New York a team of the best minds that look at what happened in Wuhan, look at what happened in Italy on the reopening, and making sure that what we're doing is based on all the science available internationally. And what is the probability, what is the possibility of a second wave happening? What is the possibility of people re-experiencing the virus? There's some reports from South Korea. Let's understand, because it's fooled me once. It's one thing to make a mistake once, but this nation should not go through it again. And before we make these decisions, let them be informed by the experiences we're seeing all across the globe.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.